Hi all and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to go over some unique activation systems in miniature wargaming. A lot of the flavor and feel of a wargame comes from the type of activation system it has. And I believe personally it's one of the most defining traits of a wargame. It's just how it activates and how it plays. Because that can really be the begin all and end all, at least for me. It's one of the things I look at first. Now, delving into the different types of activation systems, we have a baseline, an I-Go, You-Go, or I-G-O, U-G-O. Warhammer, Infinity, War Machine, and a large mix of systems have I-Go, You-Go baked into them. While there are variations, Age of Sigmar and Horus Heresy allow the opposing players to do things on the opponent's turn, for instance, and Games Workshop has I-Go, You-Go baked into its core for better or worse. I find a base I-Go You-Go system not really unique. I consider a base I-Go You-Go system Warhammer 40,000. In the case of Infinity, it has a more unique system, and in the case of Age of Sigmar and Horus Heresy allowing reactions, I also consider it a more unique system. But considering how popular those games are, I won't be going into them this video. Now, our other main arbitrary definition is alternating activations. Kill Team and Kings of War are a good example of this. Alternating activation by itself feels like the new standard of games, at least in the modern day. And there are a lot of variations to these two, but I feel like I-Go, You-Go, and alternating activation are the basis of most wargaming systems. If it doesn't have one, it's going to have the other or some other form of the other. Now, there are other variations people have attempted to attach to them, but I think these two really encapsulate 90% of the systems you run into. Now, leaning on alternate activations is Battletech. Battletech has a very basic alternating activation system that has a slight enough twist that I feel like it's worth mentioning. The slight twist is whoever rolls higher goes last. Due to how combat and damage allocation works in Battletech, it does allow for more tactical movements and for you to make a better decision. It also has a system in place if you outnumber your enemy, so you move 2 mechs, the other moves 1, etc., or you move 3, they move 1 if you're somehow in that situation, which would be kind of hard to get into. This allows the game to feel balanced while allowing you to bring mixed forces without too much trouble, and I far prefer bringing mixed forces in Battletech anyway. Next on to some of our more unique things, we have Dropfleet Commander. Dropfleet Commander uses a battle group based activation system, which means cards and number values. You build a deck using battle group cards, those decks have strategic value, and then you draw off with your opponent. The winner is the one with the lower number, aka your strategic value. A d6 breaks ties. As the winner, you choose to go first or second in this alternating activation turn. I enjoy how this combines alternating activations with dice and strategic list building a lot. This is really something that helps get determined in your list building step with the battle groups you choose and the deck you choose to build, which can lead to a lot of variation, especially in long-term gameplay. Next up, we have Blood and Plunder, another card-based activation system. Using a standard playing card deck, each player draws cards and use that to determine initiative, your card facing determining exactly what you can do. If you get the starter set, it also comes with some really cool themed decks. Now, the reason I'm shouting this out so soon after Dropfleet is it's a more simple system, but I also believe Blood and Plunder highlights a card-based system that a lot of games use as well. And this is kind of like a nice encapsulation of cards are used as well, but on the internet I did not find a term I liked that kind of said what they were other than alternating and I-Go, You-Go, so this is their nice little shout out. I enjoy card-based systems. It has a lot more flavor and uniqueness to every system that it is in, because it's just different than what you play 90% of the time. Next up is Gaslands. It has another very simple but different way of activating. It works on a gear-based system since it is, a car racing combat game. A car in Gear 6 activates before Gear 1, etc., with each turn having 6 phases. So a car in Gear 6 can act in all 6 phases, a car in Gear 1 can act in Gear 1's phase, etc. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. With 6 gears in a racing game, you have a lot of variation in turn order, which helps a lot to make the game feel fresh every time you play it. Next up is one of the war games near and dear to my heart, Star Wars Legion. Legion does a mix of alternating activation and blind orders with its token-based system. Each player has tokens that denote a unit type and then toss those into a bag. You alternate turns pulling from a bag, stack of tokens, and activate the unit type you draw. So if, for instance, you have 4 corps and 2 special forces, along with your commander unit, you toss all of those into a bag, shuffle it up, and draw. If it's the one commander token, you only activate them. If it's one of the core tokens, you activate any of your core units. If it's one of your special forces, you activate your special forces, etc. And that goes for every unit type in the game, whether it be operative, support, heavy support. And this allows you to get the nice little bit of variation while still going back and forth with your opponent. It also has extra depth with you being able to pass if you have less activations than your opponent, forcing them to do something when you don't want to do something. Altogether, it leads to a pretty unique feel that I haven't found perfectly encapsulated in any other game yet. I'm gonna butcher this name terribly because I just found out about this wargame while researching this video, but I believe it is LaSalle, 2nd edition. LaSalle is another twist on I Go You Go, but with interactivity on opponent's side that I find very unique and interesting. Each player has momentum and units cost momentum to activate. Each player has a limited momentum pool, units cost 1 to 3 to activate. However, when you activate a unit, your opponent can get a chance to interrupt the activation if it happens close enough to one of their units, allowing them to activate their unit and then possibly interrupt your chain order of activations and take the momentum of the battle. This is a fantastic system and really makes me want to try Napoleonic Wargaming when I have avoided it thus far. If I can get somebody to try this system with me, I might, because out of all the systems I researched for the multitude of wargame videos I've made so far, this is the one that has intrigued me the most so far. And the wargame that inspired me to make this video, Bolt Action. Bolt Action has the best historical activation system I've ever played. I would argue it's one of the best activation systems, period. Both players put order dice into a bag and blind draw them from the bag. If you get your dice, you go. That can be one or multiple. Leads to every game playing different, even with the same 2 lists fight, and a lot of depth. I could activate my entire army if I had luck on my side before you get to activate one unit, and those situations have happened to me before. It forces you to move with the knowledge that you gotta be careful. This could be where your unit could be for the next 10 activations. It discourages stupid movements in a World War II based wargame. Running out of the middle of the field is death, pretty much. And yeah, if you get the last and first activation, that's a gamble, but that's like a game-winning gamble. That's not something you want to do every single time, because if you do that, you're losing more units than is worth. I love this system. It's great. It's one of my favorite activation systems. I recommend trying Bolt Action just for it. Next up is Crossfire, which doesn't necessarily fit into any categories because it is a turn-stealing game. It is a very old, from what I've researched, it's decades old, yet still unique and innovative system. It's a system older than me. You move a unit until it can shoot or an enemy can shoot, making lines of fire extremely important. This can feel very punishing at times for new players. In fact, a lot of recent reviews I found did not necessarily love it, but it provides a very unique system of play, and it is enough to, again, make me intrigued. I technically have a lot of models where I feel like I could run this with my Bolt Action and Flames of War collections, so I might have to give this system a try and see how it compares to the other historicals I've played. Next up is a twist on alternating activations done by many systems, but I figure I would highlight Cyberpunk Combat Zone because it is one of my favorite games. Combat Zone has an interesting twist on alternating activations. There are no turns. Each player chooses one model to activate, and you can do as many actions as you can or wish to. And you can save actions for reactions or later activation. As Cyberpunk is based on a reactionary system, if you get hurt, you can shoot back at your opponent. You can choose to not activate anything and refresh all of your character's actions, which can also trigger abilities and other models, as there are specifically models designed to only activate in the phase where you refresh your main gang's action. The game ends when the mission's win condition gets met by either side, so there are no turns. Technically, you can say there is a slight flow of turns, as there are going to be points when you refresh your entire board, but I would argue that those don't necessarily count as turns, because certain gangs can really string out and make their, in essence, activation cycles last really long. And next up is Saga. Saga has a twist on I Go You Go, but a really fun twist. You roll dice to activate abilities for units, and these dice can also allow you to store for reactions on the opponent's turn, or trigger abilities that can affect the opponent's army on their turn. So it's a very reactive system, and depending on the faction you make, the game can feel more like an alternating activation system. From what I've read, the Normans can rely heavily on cavalry that can charge on your turn, making it feel like your opponent's turn is reacting to you as you go. Saga includes all the Middle Ages, not just Vikings, but Vikings will be my first go into this because a Viking wargame sounds really fun. They sell some plastic figures, but also you can get figures from Victrix and other historical sellers that would work perfectly fine for them. Hopefully you found a new game that intrigued you in this list, and please tell me what your favorite activation system is in the comments below. I know I keep saying I'll see you next week, but this time I should actually see you next week, because the summer rush of craziness and my anniversary and dealing with work, knock on wood, has finally calmed down. Have a wonderful weekend all,